Millionaire invited the black cleaning lady as a joke, but she stole the show. It was a bright, sunny Saturday afternoon at one of the city's most opulent estates, the kind of place where marble floors gleamed, chandeliers sparkled like captured stars, and every detail screamed wealth. Guests in designer attire laughed and sipped champagne, completely unaware that a cruel game was about to unfold. Aaliyah, a young black cleaning lady, was known for her quiet professionalism. She had spent years working in some of the city's most luxurious homes, always meticulous, always respectful. Today, though, her day off had been interrupted by an unusual request, a call from a wealthy millionaire, inviting her over for what he described as a little fun. Her instincts told her something was off. The tone of the millionaire's voice hinted at mockery, yet Aaliyah's curiosity and quiet confidence nudged her forward. She didn't know it yet, but stepping onto that property would place her in the center of a room filled with entitlement, privilege, and unspoken cruelty. As she approached the mansion, the massive gates loomed overhead. Valets barely acknowledged her arrival, smirks faint but unmistakable on their faces. The millionaire lounged by the pool, grinning theatrically, signaling her to come forward. Guests whispered and chuckled, clearly expecting her to be the punchline of their private joke. "You're here," the millionaire said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Everyone, look who decided to join us." The guests' laughter echoed around her, a mixture of subtle cruelty and arrogance. Aaliyah felt her chest tighten, her heart pounding. But she didn't falter. She took measured steps forward, her expression calm yet determined. Every eye in the room followed her. The millionaire clapped his hands theatrically. "Come on, show us a little performance," he sneered. The laughter escalated. And then something changed. Aaliyah straightened her back, took a slow breath, and gave a small, confident smile. But it wasn't the smile of submission. It was the smile of someone about to reclaim the room. Phones clicked, eyes widened, and whispers fell silent. Aaliyah was about to turn the entire gathering upside down in a way no one could have anticipated. What happened next would leave every single person in that mansion speechless and completely flip the script on the joke they thought they were telling. Aaliyah's mornings always began before sunrise, in the soft, quiet hours when the world seemed most peaceful. In her modest apartment, the aroma of brewing coffee mingled with the faint scent of breakfast her mother was preparing. Her younger siblings stirred in the living room, giggling quietly over a shared joke, while her father sat at the small kitchen table, the morning paper in hand, his calm presence a comforting anchor. Despite the simplicity of their home, there was warmth, laughter, and a quiet sense of pride. Every corner of the apartment reflected the care and love that shaped their family. They didn't have wealth or luxury, but they had each other, and they had resilience, a trait Aaliyah had inherited from both parents. Aaliyah, now in her late 20s, had long understood the value of hard work. She spent her days cleaning some of the city's most opulent homes, polishing floors, organizing spaces, and ensuring every detail was perfect. Her work was often invisible, taken for granted by those who lived in luxury, but Aaliyah carried it out with dignity and care. To her, it wasn't just a job, it was a reflection of her integrity, a way to show that excellence could exist regardless of status or circumstance. Her family often teased her lovingly about her diligence. "One day, you'll be running a mansion of your own," her little brother joked as she poured cereal into bowls. Aaliyah laughed, tousling his hair, her heart swelling with affection. These small, ordinary moments reminded her of why she worked so hard, not for applause or recognition, but for the quiet assurance that she could provide and inspire. Outside, the city was waking up. Cars honked impatiently, pedestrians hurried past, and sunlight glinted off glass towers, illuminating both wealth and disparity. In these streets, Aaliyah had learned to navigate subtle judgments, furtive glances, whispered assumptions, and the occasional smirk from someone who assumed she didn't belong. She had developed an instinct for noticing these things without letting them weigh her down, a skill born of experience and quiet resilience. On this particular morning, Aaliyah's routine was interrupted by an unusual phone call. It was from a wealthy millionaire whose name she had heard whispered in the city's social circles, a man notorious for his extravagant lifestyle and sharp sense of humor. His invitation was playful on the surface. He asked her to visit his mansion for a little fun. But there was an undertone that immediately set her on edge, a hint that this fun might not be in her favor. Aaliyah paused, staring at the screen. Something in the tone felt like a test, or perhaps a trap. The city outside seemed suddenly larger, the mansion he spoke of towering in her mind as a symbol of power, privilege, and possible ridicule. She debated whether to go. Curiosity battled with caution. Her instincts told her to be wary, yet a quiet, unshakable courage nudged her forward. Packing a small bag, Aaliyah took a deep breath, smoothing her uniform into something more presentable for the occasion. She thought briefly of her family, imagining their smiles and trusting eyes. She knew that whatever happened, she carried with her the lessons of her upbringing: dignity, resilience, and self-respect. As she stepped onto the city streets, the sun broke fully over the horizon, casting long shadows between towering buildings. Each step toward the mansion seemed heavier than the last, not from distance, but from the anticipation of what awaited her. Somewhere beyond those grand gates lay a room filled with people who didn't yet know her strength, a place where her poise, wit, and quiet authority would be tested in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Aaliyah's heart raced, but she didn't falter. The call had seemed like a joke, yet a seed of determination had taken root. She felt a subtle tension in the air, the kind of tension that precedes confrontation, injustice, and revelation. She knew she was walking into a world that had not been built for someone like her, a place where privilege often masked cruelty. And yet with each step she reminded herself, dignity isn't given, it's claimed. The moment Aaliyah stepped through the grand gates of the Millionaire's mansion, she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her. The sprawling estate glittered with extravagance. Fountains glistened in the sun, marble statues lined the walkways, and the manicured gardens were immaculate. Yet none of that beauty mattered. What mattered was the invisible wall she had already sensed, the expectation that she was there as a joke, a source of entertainment for the wealthy elite. Valets barely acknowledged her presence. One even let a smirk slip across his face before quickly looking away, as if he were sharing a silent joke with the crowd. Aaliyah felt the sting, but she held her head high, walking with steady, measured steps toward the poolside gathering. The millionaire lounged in a chair, sunglasses perched arrogantly on his nose, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Ah, she's here. Everyone, look who decided to join us," he said, dramatically spreading his arms. His guests tittered, some trying to hide their amusement, others laughing outright. It was a performance, and she was the uninvited star. "Come on, show us a little entertainment," he barked, his voice dripping with mockery. The guests clinked glasses, encouraging the spectacle. Aaliyah's chest tightened. The words cut deeper than she expected. This wasn't just casual rudeness. It was deliberate humiliation. She paused for a moment, feeling the judgmental eyes of the wealthy crowd. Every glance reminded her that her skin, her job, and her presence were seen as inferior, as objects for amusement. The subtle systemic unfairness, the unspoken hierarchy of power, was suffocating. Yet she drew on her family's lessons: dignity, composure, and resilience. She inhaled slowly, keeping her movements controlled, calm, and deliberate. The billionaire's taunts grew bolder. He gestured to one of his guests. "Hey, why don't you tell her how to really clean? Maybe she needs some lessons in manners too." Laughter erupted. Some of the guests raised their eyebrows, but most joined in. The weight of complicity was palpable. Aaliyah's mind raced. This was not just personal. It was systemic. It was a microcosm of the biases she had experienced all her life, now amplified before an audience of people who believed their wealth gave them the right to belittle others. The humiliation intensified when the millionaire called for a champagne bottle. "Let's toast to her efforts." He laughed cruelly, spilling some of the sparkling wine toward her direction, a symbolic gesture of disdain. Guests laughed louder. Aaliyah froze for a moment, then remembered her parents' words. "Your worth isn't defined by how others treat you. Stand tall, always." Her composure held, but the tension was palpable. Phones appeared, some to record her response, some capturing the scene for social media. Aaliyah noticed some faces among the guests shifting. Not all were comfortable. Subtle signs of empathy flickered, a raised brow, a half-formed frown, a glance of hesitation. She drew energy from those small moments. The billionaire, sensing her calm, leaned forward, assuming dominance. "Why so serious? Aren't you going to dance for us, clean faster, or do something entertaining?" The mocking tone dripped like venom. Aaliyah's jaw tightened, but she refused to let anger control her actions. Instead, she took a single deliberate step forward and began to speak, not pleading, not apologizing, but asserting herself with calm authority. Her voice carried across the crowd, confident, precise, and unexpected. "I am not here for your amusement," she said. The room went quiet for a fraction of a second, like the world was holding its breath. The billionaire blinked, surprised, then laughed nervously. He leaned back, trying to regain control. "Oh? And what exactly do you think you're doing here?" he scoffed. Aaliyah didn't flinch. She continued, her words firm and dignified. "I am a professional. I bring respect, precision, and integrity to my work, qualities you apparently do not recognize." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Phones clicked rapidly, capturing every word. The atmosphere shifted. The laughter that had once been cruel now faltered, uncertain. Some guests looked guilty, realizing the cruelty they had silently condoned. Others still laughed, but the power dynamics had begun to tilt. The billionaire, visibly rattled, waved his hands. "You think a few words can change anything?" His voice quivered, betraying the first crack in his armor. Aaliyah smiled faintly, not out of amusement, but in quiet triumph. She had won a moment of moral authority. Yet the tension remained. The room waited to see if he would retaliate or if someone would intervene. She knew the story was far from over. And then, the billionaire snapped his fingers at one of his guests, whispering something in a cruel tone. The guest moved toward Aaliyah, attempting to escalate the harassment physically by gesturing aggressively toward her belongings. A hush fell over the gathering. Everyone could feel the danger and the injustice in the air. Before anyone could react, Aaliyah made a move that no one saw coming, an action that would turn the entire room upside down and leave everyone speechless. The air inside the mansion had shifted. The laughter that had filled the room earlier had now died down to a tense, uneasy murmur. Guests whispered among themselves, phones poised, as if sensing the storm that was about to erupt. Aaliyah stood tall near the center of the gathering, her calm demeanor in sharp contrast to the growing unease around her. Every step she had taken, every word she had spoken, had led to this moment, the peak of confrontation. The millionaire's grin had vanished. His fingers drummed nervously on the armrest of his poolside chair. He looked around, expecting support from his guests, but instead found many staring at him with surprise, uncertainty, even disapproval. He realized, perhaps too late, that the joke had backfired spectacularly. Aaliyah's poise and eloquence had shifted the power dynamic entirely. "Enough!" the billionaire barked, attempting to reassert control. His voice was sharp, commanding, but lacking its usual confidence. "You think you can just—" He faltered, searching for the words that would maintain his authority. Aaliyah met his gaze directly, her voice calm, but resolute. "I am not here to be mocked. I am a human being, deserving of respect, and your wealth or social status does not give you the right to demean others." Her words carried the weight of years of subtle injustice, of being underestimated, overlooked, and belittled. A murmur ran through the crowd. Phones clicked. Some guests, previously silent, began recording. Others whispered affirmations of support. The mansion, once a stage for ridicule, had become a courtroom of public opinion, and Aaliyah was presenting the evidence. The billionaire, sensing the shift, tried a different tactic. "You're making a scene. Do you understand that?" His face reddened, a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "Do you know who I am?" Aaliyah smiled faintly. "Yes. And that makes your behavior even more unacceptable." The words landed like a hammer, sharp and undeniable. Guests murmured, some nodding in agreement, others glancing nervously at their own phones. Then Aaliyah reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. With a swipe, she displayed a video she had captured earlier. The entirety of the mockery, The laughter, the gestures, and the cruel comments of the millionaire and his associates. The footage played on a large screen nearby, filling the room with undeniable proof. Gasps erupted. The billionaire's face turned pale. He gestured wildly, trying to grab the phone, but it was too late. The evidence was public, permanent, and impossible to deny. The guests' reactions ranged from shock to anger. Some whispered about accountability, while others tried to defend him quietly, realizing that the power he wielded socially had limits when confronted with truth. Aaliyah continued, her voice unwavering. This is what happens when privilege becomes cruelty. You thought this was a joke, but humiliation is not entertainment. Accountability is real, and it is inescapable. The billionaire's arrogance collapsed completely. His friends shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact, others attempting to downplay the situation. The staff, who had watched from behind the scenes, began speaking up. Small confessions, moments of disrespect they had endured, all now validated in the presence of everyone. You see, Aaliyah said, her voice steady, your wealth and status do not shield you from responsibility. Respect is not optional. It is demanded by virtue of our humanity. The crowd fell silent. The weight of her words settled, pressing down on the room with undeniable authority. The billionaire, now trembling slightly, stood abruptly. This isn't over, he shouted, but no one moved to support him. The cameras, both professional and personal, had captured every moment. Social media notifications already flooded the room, indicating that the story was about to go viral. As the tension peaked, Aaliyah took a measured step back. She had won the moral high ground, but the fallout was only beginning. The crowd looked at her with newfound respect, but she knew the real battle would play out beyond these walls, in the court of public opinion, in social media, and in the wider societal discourse. Then, a hush fell. A phone buzzed in her pocket. A private message from someone she hadn't expected. An influential figure with connections to organizations that could amplify her story on a global scale. The message was brief but urgent. We need to talk. There's more at stake than you realize. Aaliyah's eyes widened. The mansion seemed to fade around her, replaced by the weight of the unknown. The confrontation had ended, but the consequences, far-reaching, unpredictable, and possibly dangerous, were only beginning. What awaited? Aaliyah next would test everything she believed about courage, justice, and the power of standing up. And the world was about to take notice. The days following the confrontation at the mansion were nothing short of extraordinary. News of Aaliyah's courage spread like wildfire, first on social media, then across local news outlets, and eventually national platforms. Videos of her calm but unwavering confrontation, combined with the undeniable evidence of the millionaire's mockery, were being shared thousands of times every hour. People were moved, inspired, and outraged in equal measure. Her story had become a symbol of dignity, standing against cruelty, a lesson in courage in the face of systemic privilege. For Aaliyah, the attention was overwhelming at first. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages of support, strangers reaching out to express gratitude, and journalists requesting interviews. But beyond the chaos of fame, there was a deeper realization. This was bigger than her. She had become a catalyst for conversations about respect, equality, and the subtle ways discrimination manifests in everyday life. The millionaire faced immediate and severe consequences. Partnerships he had taken for granted were cancelled. Invitations to exclusive events were rescinded, and his reputation suffered irreparable damage. Legal advisors quietly recommended he issue a public apology, but the damage had already been done. The world had seen not only his cruelty, but the power of accountability when courage is paired with evidence. Meanwhile, Aaliyah's family experienced a whirlwind of pride and relief. Her mother cried quietly the first night she returned from a live interview, overwhelmed by the realization that her daughter's courage had touched countless lives. Her father, a man of quiet strength, simply nodded, a proud smile breaking through his normally reserved demeanor. Her younger siblings looked at her with awe, understanding that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Their sister had shown them what it meant to stand tall, even when faced with humiliation and power imbalances. The mansion staff, inspired by Aaliyah's bravery, began to share their own stories. For years, subtle acts of disrespect had been brushed aside, smirks from guests, minor indignities, whispered comments, but now they felt empowered to speak out. The employer implemented stricter policies to ensure fairness, protect employees, and educate guests about respectful behavior. The ripple effect of Aaliyah's actions was tangible. Change had begun, not just at the mansion, but in a broader community of workplaces that took notice. Social media became a forum for meaningful dialogue. People discussed microaggressions, systemic bias, and the ways privilege can be weaponized against those with less social or economic power. Aaliyah's story provided a real-life example that was both emotionally gripping and instructive. Schools, workplaces, and community organizations invited her to speak about dignity, courage, and advocacy. Her words carried the authority of lived experience, demonstrating that resistance to injustice could be both graceful and powerful. Months later, Aaliyah returned to the mansion, not as a subject of ridicule, but as a guest invited to share her story with the staff. The atmosphere was transformed. Where there had once been fear and anticipation of humiliation, there was now respect, attentiveness, and hope. Colleagues smiled, managers listened intently, and the energy of empowerment filled the space. Aaliyah spoke not only of standing up to injustice, but also of cultivating empathy, understanding, and dignity in all interactions. Her influence extended beyond individual recognition. Online campaigns highlighted the importance of fair treatment for service staff, while community groups launched initiatives to educate people about unconscious bias. Aaliyah had sparked a movement, a reminder that courage in the face of discrimination could inspire tangible social change. Yet, even in the midst of triumph, Aaliyah reflected on the journey. The incident had begun as a cruel joke, but had evolved into a powerful lesson about human dignity. She understood that justice is not always instantaneous, that systemic change takes time, and that the courage of one individual can ignite a wave of transformation that no one expects. How would you act if you were in Aaliyah's shoes? Would you stay silent, or would you have the courage to confront injustice, even when the stakes are high? The mansion incident would remain a defining moment in her life, but the lessons extended far beyond its walls. Aaliyah's story became a symbol of hope, reminding the world that dignity, respect, and justice are not privileges, they are rights. Every action, no matter how small, has the power to create change. And as she stepped into the sunlight after her final interview, Aaliyah knew that her voice had not only altered her life, but had begun to reshape the world around her.